Hi YouTube. I want to show you guys my project today. We'll be looking at this P-51D BL UMX. Pretty much stock. I've just made this thing here for keeping the batteries in neatly, and that might end up going away today anyway. This is the P-47. You guys have probably seen my videos where I added the flaps, and I also have it set up to run on 3S battery instead of a 2S like stock, and also added some LEDs. So those are the three things I hope to accomplish with this P-51 today. So the first step is going to be for me to do some surgery and open this thing up for the first time. Looks like there's a seam line here, goes through the stars and stripes, and then stops there, opens back up. So I'm going to cut along that, and then I'm going to pull this thing off. The first thing I got to do is verify that we have a channel. Okay guys, we're back with the X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to move the P-47 out of the way. You guys can check out my videos on the mods for that if you're more interested in the P-47D BL UMX. So what you want to do is find your seam lines with the knife and just cut through the decal. Remember, you're going to try to keep these decals obviously because they're sweet, but they're very thick. So as you cut with a purpose, but don't cut so hard that you end up chasing off the channel. And you can kind of see the channel by separating the two pieces and deflecting them back like that. So don't just depend on guiding just strictly by where the knife wants to go. Sometimes you'll get lucky and it'll work just fine. But I've actually had problems where I've cut through the rest of the airframe on accident. I usually take it up to about halfway point and bring it back around. And then you get a nice clean cut. You'll be able to retape that without anybody being able to see. And if they do see it, then you can just say, you do it better. Because it's really hard to do it any better than that. Same thing here, you're just going to take and find that line, verify it before you get into the cutting part. Sometimes it's a little easier to start the cut halfway through the decal, because then if you try to do it right at the tip of the decal, or the edge of the decal where it really originates, then what will happen is you'll just kind of seal that down into the crack. Okay, so that should do it for that seam. Obviously we'll have to potentially carry it around all the way over on the other side, but let's just see if it breaks free yet. Feels like maybe we got a little adhesive somewhere in there that's still wanting to hang on. And something they haven't done before, they've got these decorative exhausts. Okay, cool, so it is broke free there. And maybe I got a little bit of glue inside of here. Looks like I maybe didn't get it cut all the way down. Okay. So this is where it's a little scary, because it feels as though maybe it's still attached somewhat. Oh yeah, there's a little bit more tape there that I didn't recognize at first. So guys, it goes all the way halfway through the wing. Okay, then you can go ahead and rotate this up, which I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and cut the rest of the seam, and then I should be allowed to rotate it without any damage to the foam. And anybody who's worked with these UMX models, you'll know exactly what I mean. They are pretty delicate. I mean, it's amazing that they don't get damaged more in flight, but they hold up really pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to try to not cut these seams because we have a nice straight piece here, unlike the P-47 that seem to kind of have a little bit of a bend. If you have a bend, then they don't like to fold like this. Okay, and you can see you've got these little fingers that come down. Boy, that is going to be nice and clean, guys. This little export, oh boy, and look at the way the antenna came factory. Jeez. It's all coiled up. I'm going to pull that straight back here. And I'm going to put just a dab of CA or something to hold that in place. Looks like really clean work otherwise here. So I'm excited to see that. And then, hey, for those of you who haven't seen this yet, this is an EFLUM 180 BLB 3000 KB Horizon Hobby Inc. And it is the EFLUM 180 BLB 3000 KB motor. So it is a different motor. It's a little bit bigger than the motor in the P-47, as I understand. Not 100% sure if this thing's going to run on 3S, but we're going to come up with a test, and we're going to do that test to see if it runs. And the other thing you want to take note of is that there is an adjustment for your tail dragger right there, which is super nice that you've got that accessible. Whereas on the P-47, if I recall, you may not have such easy access to it, even with it opened up. So I'm going to pause it. I'll get a servo ready so we can test for the flap channel, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that next. Okay guys, got some more things pulled out of my storage area. I've got a, looks like a used servo. I don't know if this one was noisier or if it got damaged, or yeah, it feels like the teeth on this gear maybe got damaged. That's why I wrote red on there. So this one will at least be good for testing. And then I have just a tip. This is when being an RC hoarder comes in handy. This is a Hobby King. It's an HKM 282A, which this is the part number. It's a 14839, and that's I think that's a 3 gram or 2.5 gram servo. So I'm just gonna choose between these two. I'd really like to use one servo for this to keep the weight down and also just keep the expenses down too. But I wanted to show you this little antenna issue that we have here. As you can see, it's kind of nasty the way that thing is put in there. Can't believe they let that go like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stress it one time, hopefully, and go ahead and pull it so that it's in a safe position, so it's away from all the control rods and everything, and just get that down and away from the board. And once that's down and away from the board, then I can go ahead and CA that into position. Again, holding down the weight is always a good idea on these little dinky models. So I've got my medium thickness Instaset, or excuse me, the CA. I'm just going to put a little in that trough there, and I'm just going to push this down into it, and it's probably not going to want to stay. We'll just give her a second and just see if it'll stay on its own. And then probably what we'll do is we'll get this out and we'll just give it one sneeze in there. And then that should set that up real quick. Yeah, it's already set, so I'll give it one more drip just while it's being held in place. And so you can see, guys, that antenna is in a lot better place than it was just a few minutes ago. So try to get this thing zoomed in for you all so you can see kind of a little bit better what's going on. And so basically I just need to plug in a battery. Next step, let's get this stuff capped off, and I'll be right back. We'll have all the electronics plugged in and ready to test. Okay, so for testing, guys, we're going to use this 180 milliamp 2S 25C Nanotech. Nothing magical about that particular setup for testing and everything, but we'll just go ahead and grab the lead and plug it in, and then we'll let this AS3X initiate as usual. Okay, so my throttle cut's on and tested. Ailerons, elevator, rudder. Make sure everything works before you get into testing, just in case something weird happened. And then I'm just going to take this messed up servo, which incidentally I can just replace that gear. I don't have to throw the whole thing away. And these things are keyed in such a way that they only fit in one way. You won't hurt it if you put it in the wrong terminal. It's just fine. It's just not going to work right. So you got to try both, because this actually has more pins. Okay, so you can watch the little red thing. There you go. Sweet! Okay, so that incidentally is switch A, which I believe is tied to gear. So there's no reason to believe in my mind that I can't go ahead and use this thing to do flaps, which I'm going to be doing, and you guys can enjoy the experience with me. I'm going to go ahead and pull this forward so you guys can get a view of it working yourself. You can see it jumping around, and that's just with me Flip the switch, and then real quick on the radio, go to the monitor. You can see that looks like it's on the gear channel. Yep, so it'd be channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sweet. Okay, so that means we can continue with our project, knowing that flaps are going to work. So now the next step will be to probably go ahead and decide if I'm going to use this servo or if I'm going to use the Hobby King variety, which, to be perfectly honest with you, either one's probably going to be fine, but it's going to have more to do with the linkage and then the amount of throw. So I'm going to do some testing here, and I'll let you know how things turn out here when we're done. Okay guys, I've been doing some thinking about this, and I got my old, I called it my Spavoo because I had a brushless board, brushless motor, actually the same motor that was in the P-47 UMX, and then I had my Habu main board in it because at the time I was trying to learn to fly with safe. And after I destroyed it many times, I decided to try to redo these servos, and it was a miserable failure. But either way, I've already got ends built onto those, so I'm going to get one of those out rather than trying to cut this one up and compromise this brand new servo. And we'll see if we can't get those out, and then we'll see if that will operate better. Because in looking at the underside of this plane, the P-51 has such a striking profile, and it's very recognizable. And so if you were to sit here and plop one of these things right in the middle, you're going to obstruct the view of this air scoop, and it's going to look stupid. Now, that being understood, you could probably take this servo, this linear servo, and hide it maybe underneath here, but I'm just not sure how I'm going to get the throw at such a steep angle to actuate the flaps. So that's why I'm leaning toward using the little Hobby King micro servo, because I can possibly put that off to the side, something like this, flush cut it in, so that it actually slides up into the wing mass, and then this will stick out. And the only thing I'll have to be mindful of is leaving enough room to still get batteries in. So, and that can always be toyed with later. So I just wanted to give you a quick update as I'm cooking through this, thinking about different things. So guys, we got this little Hobby King servo out. Just taking some of the epoxy and different crap that had been used to hold it in the other plane, and we're just going to eliminate some of those scrap pieces, get them off of there, and make it ready for this new plane. By the way, if you're using epoxy in an ultra micro application, you're probably not going to be too happy with the results because it's way too heavy. You could get away with a little bit here and there, but I wouldn't recommend it. So that was something I learned from that project there. Sorry, I got out of view there for a second, guys. Anyway, I'll keep you up to date as I go. Okay guys, one thing that is really nice about epoxy is, as you can see on this thing, I already had this end built on here, the Eflite end. Look how clean that came. There's like not even any residue on there on the servo. So just got a little pile of garbage here, and that's about it. So we're going to keep cooking on this project. Just wanted to give you an update. So basically, this is a servo that's going to be used. It's color for color. If you do cut off the factory end on your standard Turnigy, Hobby King, whatever this is, and the colors do not line up, they're actually inverse of each other on the layout, but they're also a different connector, of course. If they were inverse, you could just pull the pins and switch them. And the way you do that is you just take this thing, and I'll try to zoom in. It's going to be a really hard thing to film, guys. But the way you would do that is you would take your X-Acto knife or whatever utility you're using, and you get up under there and you pull it up, then you yank that one cord out. So you can take and pull each of these little plastic pins up, and that wire will be allowed to come out. So anyway, but I'm pretty sure that these connectors have a different design on the pitch of the actual angle that they bite onto the pin that slides into the socket. So you'll want to be careful that if you try to just, rather than splicing an end on, if you try to go ahead and just pull the pins out of this connector and move it into the other, or vice versa, they may not bite the pins effectively, so you may not get a good contact. Anyway, I'm going to get this thing into the plane, then that'll be the next step for us to see. Okay guys, just wanted to show you something I did. I was getting sick and tired of this thing tipping around on me, so I cut this little block. You just cut a notch in it. And if you're half as obsessed with this stuff as I am, then you'll have tons of that stuff lying around. And that'll just keep it up off the counter and keep it from tipping around. Okay guys, I'm going to go into my DX18 menu. So for those of you using a different transmitter, sorry in advance. From the main screen, system setup, yes. Aircraft type, normal. Go ahead and switch that to one flap, one aileron. And you're saying, well wait, but there's two ailerons. Well, there's only one signal for them, that's what they're talking about. So, go back. And then basically you can go down to channel assign, and we know it's the gear, so we're going to clear that, and we're just going to leave that. Let's change this to inhibit, and then we're going to go to next, then we're going to go down to, we're going to clear that, we're going to go back out, and then that way it won't cause confusion. Flap system, we want to change it from switch A to switch B, so you'll just select it and then you can actuate the switch, or you can scroll to it. And if you look back here, nothing happens with the gear switch now, but when I flip this, what you're hearing is the elevator. So what we got to do is we got to make an assignment, because as you flip the switch, it's trying to move the elevator to make the correction for the ballooning. So go back into system setup, hit yes, go back down to channel assign, and you want gear to be assigned as flaps. Okay. So now, as you can see, I move this, take off flaps, landing flaps. And of course I'll have to play with the position exactly, but if you look now at my monitor, you can see the flap, which is assigned as channel 5. Sorry, that was a little backwards way of doing it, guys, but I just wanted to show you how I'm doing that real quick so you can kind of get a feel for it. I always set my flaps here, and I always set my gear here. And then if I have a stabilizer on off, I'll turn it here, and then I use this knob for stabilizer intensity if I have it. So anyway, so we'll go back to the main menu, and we're ready to rock and roll. Next time you see it, I'll probably be trying to figure out my exact position on where this is going to sit to get the linkages correct. So keep watching, guys. Okay guys, it's been all of, what, 3 flights, and I'm already taking this thing out. I found it to be effective for what I wanted it for, but now that I'm switching things around a little bit, it's not really necessary. So, hope you didn't get too in love with this setup, but you can see how easy that was to pull out, and you'll see that there's very, very limited damage in there. And we're talking about a little bit of silver paint there, a little bit of silver paint there, and that's what that little cavity protector looked like from the outside. So anyway, that's out of the way now, so we've got a little bit more flexibility on where we can mount this. I've been just kind of playing with the idea of maybe sticking it there, but then it sticks out, you know, from those tabs up, and it just looks kind of ugly. And I really, really want that articulation to go like this instead of going like this or like that, because otherwise I'm going to get a difference in my angle in my deployment of flaps from one side to the other. And yeah, I could change that with the way I do my mechanical rods. But for now, it's probably going to end up being cut into the wing, and I'm going to sink that in there, and it's going to go something like that, which is going to make it a little trickier to get batteries in, but hopefully I can sink it far enough that it's not a huge issue. So anyway, just wanted to keep you up to speed on what's going on here. Okay guys, this is where it's going to be. I'm getting ready to cut this thing, so I'm going to hold it tight, and then I'm going to take an ultrafine Sharpie and trace around it, cut out only the depth of the servo itself, and then we'll have to probably renegotiate it so that the control arm gets vertical, because it's going to go in and it's going to be at a slight angle to the left as opposed to being straight up and down. So we want to make that nice and true, and that's what we're going to do. So I'll show you that next. Alright guys, I'm going to use a torch to heat up the tip of my X-Acto knife. I got 2 or 3 different X-Acto knives I use. You can see this one's dark because I use it to heat it up. Then I have one like this that's bent too. I'll be cutting out this little trace pattern. Just wanted to show you, if you try to use an X-Acto knife, it's fine, but it'll actually dent around it. If you heat up your blade too hot, then you'll melt too much. So you kind of have to find that balancing act between, oh, and then also make sure you don't catch your ceiling on fire when you're using a little torch like this. And kids, if you're watching, don't try this at home, or try it at home, but just have your parents watch. So as you can see, it just cuts through like butter. And all you got to do then is just, as you get close to your mark, you can sit there and heat that blade up again, and then that takes that material away like instantaneously, and you can make it so that it heats and removes the material straight to your mark, which is pretty cool. And I usually just cut grooves like this, and as it gets cold you'll know because it'll stop cutting. Go back for some more heat. Just keep cutting until they're gone. And the cool thing about this is you're technically not actually removing the material. So yeah, there's a certain amount of weight loss that you could achieve here, but that's not really what we're necessarily going for. We want the strength of this material in addition to the weight loss, if you can get it at the same time. See, and then you just work it sideways. And if you have smoke detectors in close proximity, sometimes they get a little pissed off when you do this, so just be ready. It's probably not an impossibility that they would go off. I usually do this in my shop where I have an exhaust system, but I wanted to do a video for you guys, so I'm doing it here. Okay, so you can see so far we have the pocket started, but we're not quite deep enough, so I'm going to go and just grab the servo, which is here. Sorry, I have 2 of them sitting out. And you can see that I'm close on my pocket size, but I need to get a little more depth out of it. So that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to go grab a different tool, get some more depth, and then I'll show you the finished product there. Alright guys, this is the awesome tool I got. It's a piece of bent wire. You can heat this little triangular shape, and then it works great to dig out the foam. And yes, I do bend these occasionally and reuse them, but wait till it's red hot and you're ready to rock. And just try not to touch the foam that you want to keep, because if you're anywhere near it, it's going to take it. And that's how you can open up a pocket real easy. Try not to touch the hot end, that's not a good way to do it either. So now that you've got that pocket opened up somewhat, now we can see how big the opening is compared to our actual servo, which it looks like depth-wise we're really close. And you'll notice I didn't cut out those spots there yet, and that's on purpose because those are going to help to hold the servo in. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm going to go ahead and basically score those with the X-Acto knife that's sharp. I'm just going to cut a little guide, and then that little guide will receive the arms of this servo as we press it in. And for now, I guess the wire's just going to be popped up until I figure out how deep I need to make this. And as you can see, that thing's in there. certainly not a finished product here, guys, but you can see we've got a good start at it. What we're going to do is we're going to just work that until it's totally flush, and you can see we're starting to work it back to where it's vertical. So you see that servo is going to be at a slight angle because of the dihedral on these wings. So that's our next complicated thing to figure out. I use that terminology very loosely, by the way, but anyway, guys, keep watching, you'll see it. Alright guys, I think I might have it where I want it. I had to take a look at the cable coming out of my servo. It was looking like maybe it was a little damaged, but it wasn't damaged. So throttle cut's on still. You can see the flaps servo moving. And I did have to make a little bit of a channel for the wire to ride down in there. The other thing I had to compromise on to a certain extent is that I didn't get that thing quite as deep as I had originally hoped, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. You can see there's a little bit of a lip up there, but the idea is right now I've still got a lip. Oh, sorry, still got a little bit of material on the top side of that servo. And guys, this is some hard stuff to film because it's just so stinking small. And you can see up under there, I've got a little channel for the wire to come out, because if you recall, the wire was mounted on this end, and I didn't want to wrap it all the way around. I just wanted to go down and through, so I made a little channel for it. Now, if you want it a little bit tighter, you can just squeeze the last little bit, but I still have to glue this, and I'm actually kind of thinking about using hot glue, which is not the smartest idea on a UMX just because it's heavy. The catch for me is that it might help to mitigate some of this height issue, and it'll also help in terms of trying to get a more removable servo after the fact. I don't know, I haven't decided quite yet, but I'll show you what I do, and then obviously the wire just goes right through where the battery leads and then the ESC leads are, and it plugs right in. So I'll tie up this excess, and you guys, I don't know if you saw this earlier, but we fixed the antenna. Just got about 2 or 3 drips of CA, pushed it down, kicker, and then so on and so forth. So anyway, keep watching, guys. I'll have the next couple of steps. It's probably going to be something like getting this glued in, and we'll go from there. Then we can cut in the actual flaps into the wing. Okay guys, we're back to go ahead and get this thing glued in. I'm just gonna, I took off the label on the top so you don't see it through, and you're just gonna take and score some texture into the plastic. This plastic, I swear it's Teflon coated, which is a stupid thing to say, I realize, because Teflon is plastic, but it's sure slippery. So now that I've got that little bit of texture in there, it will actually take the glue a little bit better. So that's the next step. Is I've got this high-low temp glue, and it's getting warm, so I'm going to actually flip it to low. And what I'm going to do is, I mean, obviously you don't have to do this when you're doing it, but I just push out a little bit of hot glue, see how hot it is, get a feel for it, and then I'm going to go ahead and do it. A little bit of glue. You don't need a ton to get these servos to stay in the pocket. If you do your pocket right, the pocket will hold the servo without any glue. And then you just get it in there and hold it tight for a minute. Try to get that thing as vertical as possible. And I'm going to sit here and let it cool for a second. And I think we're good. Then, under normal circumstances with a big plane, I'd probably go ahead and do a little more detail work around the leading edge of that servo. But as you can see, it may not be perfect, but it's pretty close to being about perfect. I may want to wedge a little bit of material on this side just to keep that square, or just wail on it a little bit, which, there you go, now it's square. So one step I did in the middle, sorry guys, I didn't remember to start the video again, is I took this 20,000th shim, heated up the sharp edge, which I've cut off, it's usually rounded, and I took and just melted in some X's, which helps when you do push hard on it for it to collapse into that position. So we're going to be moving on to the next step. I just wanted to show you real quick what we got there, and I I might actually take just a bit of CA and run it around this edge to kind of fill it, but I'm going to take alcohol and wipe this black off first. So we'll pause it. When I get it all, I'll show you how I do it. Let's make sure this thing works. The other thing is, ideally, I'd like to be able to